few of us might even know that he was involved with the Empire State Building. But can you tell us, Ann, a few more details about the Kaufman family and the Graveraet families and what the ties between them were?
Sure. So the Graveraet family, which was L.G. Kaufman's maternal side ancestors, they were very interesting, and maybe you all know about this already, but his uncle, Robert Graveraet, was one of the founders of Marquette, because he was, this is the 1840s, after iron ore had been discovered up here. He was a Métis, he was part Native American, and he knew all the Native American dialects, and he was working for Schoolcraft, who was the Indian commissioner from Mackinac Island. And Schoolcraft, he knew that Native Americans knew where the iron ore was because, and my brother explained this to me earlier, apparently they knew how to stay away from where the iron ore was because lightning strikes were very dangerous in those areas. And they had learned where the ore was because they knew how to stay away from those areas. So Schoolcraft knew all this, so he takes Robert Graveraet with him on his trip looking for places to mine ore on the south shore of Lake Superior, and Robert Graveraet actually stakes his own claim, and he comes back with a company that has been founded to do this. And he and Peter White, who is with him, Peter White is a teenager and has come from Mackinac Island, and they're in this very precarious boat and on this very cold water, and it's May, but they make it. And they get to where Marquette, here, right here. They make it to here, and they start trying to build the town. And it's not easy. They have no horses. It's difficult, and they have to go up in the hills, and it's buggy, and there are black flies. That's where the ore is. It's tough. So the other thing about the Graveraets, which many of you also maybe know, is that Robert Graveraet wasn't the only quite interesting ancestor on that side of the family. Robert's brother Henry and his son Garrett were the officers in the 1st Michigan Sharpshooters Company K in the Civil War. And the reason being is, maybe you know, but they didn't let Native American people fight the first few years, but when they began to have a lot of losses, they said, okay, come on in, guys. But you have to be in all indigenous regiments because you don't speak English, and you need officers who speak your language and English. You can imagine that is not so easy to find. But both Henry Graveraet and his son Garrett Graveraet did. And of course, they both died. They both were killed in the Civil War quite quickly. But 1st Michigan Sharpshooters Company K was a very famous regiment in the Civil War, and if you're at all interested, there are many books about them and about that regiment. So that's the Graveraet side. And then on the other side, Sam Kaufman, L.G. Kaufman's father, came from Bavaria. He was a Bavarian Jew. He came from Bavaria to be a peddler in the UP. And of course, the UP was a great peddling destination in those years because there were so many miners here. And they all needed overalls and shirts, and they needed everything. And so this is where he came to Marquette, and he met Juliet Kaufman, who was Robert's little sister, who came to Marquette to be with her widowed brother because he lost his wife early on. So they met and they married, and LG was one of their kids. And that's how it all happened. Is that enough about that?
Yeah, I think so. And we can ask you questions after if people want to know more details. So, of course, you became interested in L.G. Kaufman because of Granite Loma.
Well, that's how I found it.
Yes. So, can you tell us a little bit about Granite Loma and how L.G. Kaufman began to build it, and what made him decide to build it?
So, L.G. Kaufman had gone to New York in 1910. Should I tell that part now? I've got to Granite Loma first. Okay. And he's very wealthy at this point, and in about 1917. And he's always liked hunting and fishing. Always. As a child, he hunted and fished, and he's living in New York, but he's like a place to do this, and so he decides that he needs to join the Huron Mountain Club. I guess you're all familiar with the Huron Mountain Club. But he wasn't really the best candidate for the Huron Mountain Club, since his father was Jewish and his mother was part Native American, and he himself was a possessor of new money. And you probably all know that both Harvey Firestone, the Tire King, and Thomas Edison, the inventor, and Henry Ford were turned away from the Huron Mountain Club as members because they were possessors of new money. Now, Henry Ford did get in a bit later because my understanding is that he helped the club keep the state of Michigan from running a very large road right through their premises. And so they let him in. I think that's how it worked. But anyway, LG wasn't their top candidate for admission, and he was refused. Not only that, but his father, Otto Young, who was the third richest man, his father-in-law, his wife Marie's father, was the third richest guy in Chicago at this time, after Marshall Field and somebody else who I can't remember. And Otto had built himself a personal palace on Lake Geneva in what they call the Newport of the Midwest. It was a giant marble house, just like a Vanderbilt house in Newport. In fact, it had sort of Grecian engravings of his daughters, including Marie, on the outside in the marble, and it had gold faucet, it had a ballroom, it had everything. It was just huge. And LG really admired his father-in-law and admired his interest in having a personal palace. And for all of these reasons, when he didn't get into the Huron Mountain Club, he decided to build. And he had perfect land for it. He had quite a lot of land right on Lake Superior. And there was a beautiful island just opposite, sort of a spit of land that sticks out. You're going to see the picture of it. And so he decided to build there. And he built in the Adirondack style, which was very fashionable at the time. Certainly the Huron Mountain Club is in the same style. And it's called Adirondack because it started really on the Adirondack Lakes in New York. And the Vanderbilts and the Pulitzers and all the very wealthy people were interested in getting back to nature. That's what they called it. They wanted to get back to nature, but they wanted to do it in a very snazzy way with no bugs and no problems and lots of servants. But they wanted to do that. And so it was all logs and stone, and that this was a particular style. It's quite beautiful, really. And Granite Loma is interesting because a lot of the other Adirondack-style camps are multiple buildings and are lower to the ground and have walkways between them. And Granite Loma is kind of like a Newport cottage in the woods. I mean, it's so big. It's a big two-story stone and log place. And this was the design that was shown to him by the architect Benjamin Marshall from Chicago, and he okayed it, and they got going. It's 26,000 square feet. That's pretty big. He really wanted to build something that would show that he had arrived, and also he wanted to do a lot of entertaining of people from the East and from Chicago. Marie was from Chicago, and he had done a lot of business there. And of course, now he lived in New York, and he was the head of a huge New York bank, and he knew all these fancy people. And I think your next question is more about what life was like there, so I'll get to that in a minute, unless you ask a different question.
No, I think a lot of us have probably heard the stories about how he had famous people come up to Granite Loma. And I remember specifically one day you called me up and you said, well, I can't find any proof that all these famous people actually came to Granite Loma. There's nothing in like the newspapers. So one of the stories is that George Gershwin came and played the piano and picked out the piano for Granite Loma and also the piano that's Kaufman Auditorium. Yeah.
We do have a little proof on that one, I'll tell you about that.
Okay, so will you just tell us a little bit about what actually was going on, and then we'll let Peter give us some of his memories too.
Well, a little later, right? Well, it was kind of a wild time up there, and the reason we know about George Gershwin is that there is a codicil in Marie Kaufman's will, in which she actually says, I'm electing a certain person to be the trustee or something, I can't remember the legal term, of this piano because it's so important because it was picked out by George Gershwin. I don't think she would have done that if it hadn't happened. I mean, that'd be kind of a weird thing to do. I'm not 100% sure he was there. Maybe he picked it out from New York, but that doesn't seem to make much sense either. I think he probably was there. Certainly, the Kaufmans had a lot of Hollywood connections. And one of the most interesting one was, I backtrack a little bit. So part of what you would see in Granite Loma in 1920, 22, 23, when you would first go there, is a lot of indigenous material, a lot. Now, most Adirondack-style lodges are not stuffed to the brim with indigenous material, so this was unusual. And I can only assume that this was a loving and private way for him to acknowledge that he did have some indigenous history there, that his mother had some indigenous blood. Anyway,